You know, a lot of girls be thinking my song's about them, but this is not to get confused. This one's for you. Know you got a roommate, call me when no one's there. Put the key under the mat and you know I'll be over there. I'll be over there, shorty, I'll be over there. I'll be hitting all the spots that you ain't even know was there. And you don't even have to ask twice. You could have my heart, or we could share it like the last slice. Always felt like
every day is upside down in Soundschi land.
Hi, and welcome to the Soundschi Land show where everybody's upside down. And today I have a guest that I'm super excited to have on the show. And I've been wanting to interview her for a very long time. I've been following her since the beginning. And Kirsty, I don't think I have to introduce you at all because I think most people know you in the body weight world and especially in the handstand world. But let me just say right at the beginning that I resonate so much with your content and with the way that you make handstands fun. And your comic is absolutely amazing, Badly Drawn Handstands. So I'm just gonna put this out there right at the start, so to get it off my chest. But I wanna dive right into the interview and have you start with your story, because I know you have a PhD in astrophysics, is that right?
Yes.
So how the hell did you end up teaching handstands and body weight training?
Yeah, I mean, well, kind of going way back before I did that. So I did gymnastics growing up and then coached competitive gymnastics for a while. So I always had that kind of coaching and movement background. And then at school, I loved math and physics. And my path, like I've been thinking about this a lot lately, like how do you end up on the path that you're on? And it's always just been going with what I find interesting and what I enjoy doing. And that tends to steer me in a good direction. So I love math and physics. I did that at university. I loved that, kept going. And I got to a point where I didn't want to stay in academics. And so I thought about what I liked about what I'd been studying, what I'd been doing. And I ended up moving to Canada and writing actuarial software, which again seems a little bit like a completely new path, but so much of the skills that I'd learned in my PhD and in my degree were really helpful in that job. And then in that job, a lot of what I was doing was, I was coding, I was writing software, but I was also dealing with clients and making a product for clients and talking to marketing people about how we market this to our clients. And so there's so much of the skill set that I learned in that job that when I decided I wanted to get more into movement again and start my own business, like I came into it with this huge skill set of like, okay, I know how to create a product. I know how to handle clients. I'm not afraid in any way of technology. So I can, I don't mind going in the back end of a website and doing stuff. I don't mind video editing, just any software. I'm quite comfortable just being like figuring it out. And I think that has helped me a lot. So I feel like my path is not kind of like I went down one path and then started back at the beginning on another. I feel like it's just like kind of taking a turn and going down this path. And I think, for anyone, wherever they are in their journey, they don't have to, they decide, oh, actually I want to teach handstands or I want to teach movement, but I've spent years doing this other thing. It's like you'll take all the skills that you learned with you, and I think it's really important to remember that.
That's so fascinating. Does that mean you do everything yourself and you made your own website and like in your Garage Gym Girl business?
Yeah, so starting out, I did everything. So my first website, I completely put that together myself. The more I've kind of gotten into it, the more I've outsourced some things. So my newer website is a little bit more, it's a little nicer than my old one. And so I did have a web developer create that kind of on my specifications. And I went into it with okay, I couldn't do any of this stuff that I'm asking him to do, but maybe he can do that. So I went into it like, I would like all these fancy bells and whistles. And he's like, sure. And so he created the platform that I can now, like if I want to create a new course, I don't need to get him to create it. I can go in and put that together. But the original platform wasn't created by me. So at some point you have to, accept that there's people with much better experience and knowledge in a specific area. But things like the video editing, the filming, all that stuff is still me doing that. So,
wow, I think that's really impressive. I mean, knowing that I definitely don't do everything myself, and my husband is a cameraman, so thankfully I can source that out.
yeah.
But yeah, that's really impressive. Speaking about your courses, can you tell us a little bit about them and how you came up with them?
Yeah, so, I mean, I have my main course, which is my Master the Handstand coaching group. And the way that came about was mostly that I love teaching handstands. And, I understood that how hard it was. My experience with teaching adults in person made me realize that learning handstands as an adult is like really hard. And, even if you're doing it with like the perfect program, it's still, there's so many points along the way where it's just so frustrating and so easy to give up. And so I wanted to create something that, had a very simple structure to it and a very simple kind of, these are the steps to getting a handstand, but also had that interaction with a coach and with the coaching. And I wanted to do it in a group setting because I find that people can learn so much from watching other people's feedback. And that's and having community, right? There's that community aspect where it's like, oh, I'm scared of moving away from the wall, but like that person just did it, right? They were also scared and they went and did it. So, maybe I'll try it. And there's so many cases where, people in my groups, it's like the biggest breakthroughs they make are not from a comment that I make. It's from like a comment that one of the other students in the group makes to them, like, oh, I was having exactly the same thing last week and then I tried this. And so they're like, they believe them because they're in the same situation. So, the coaching, the group aspect, I think it really helps people because it is so hard. And I want to make it as fun and as easy and as rewarding as possible. So,
and we're social animals too.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's learning something on your own is just, it's so much harder than it needs to be, I think. That was my first program. And then my second program, which was Handstand Building Blocks. Actually, that was my third program, but Handstand Building Blocks came about because I had an injury from a lot of my training. It wasn't specifically from handstands, but it was preventing me from doing handstands. And so it was a shoulder injury. And so it was one of those injuries where it wasn't like so bad that I couldn't do anything. It was at the level where I could probably train for an hour, but then I would be really sore afterwards. And everything I did, like resting didn't seem to help. Physio didn't seem to help. And so I really needed a new approach to that. And I started working with Kate Galliot, who her niche is, helping people become unbreakable. So her program is Unbreakable Bodies, and it's really about helping you get strong and capable of the things you want to do, whether that's handstands or hiking or running or climbing. And so I worked with her for couple of years, but it was really the first 4 months where I went from, just being in pain all the time to being able to do like 5 handstand push-ups without pain. And I was like, we need to create something with this. Like we need to take this, our combined knowledge, and create a program for handstands. And that's where Handstand Building Blocks came about, which is really, it's great for foundation people like wanting to start out and make sure that they have all the things that they need to be able to do a handstand, right? They have, like, their shoulders can do all the things that their shoulders need to be able to do, their wrists
like
can
in
do all
terms
those
of
things.
joint movements and in terms of stability.
Exactly. And so, it's great for beginners and great for people who are kind of struggling with, maybe a nagging issue that's going on. So
Cool. And then you have more programs, right? You have a press program as well, and
yeah, so I have
hanging and handstand
Oh,
push-up. I saw you have so many.
yes. So the press and the handstand push-up, those are, kind of what they say on the, you learn to press the handstand, learn a handstand push-up. The handstand push-up is also just general bent arm strength. So people always think a handstand push-up, especially at freestanding, is such an advanced movement because you need the balance, and then that bent arm pushing strength is so challenging. But that kind of comes in levels where, the level 1 is really suitable for anyone who can do push-ups. And is maybe comfortable in a handstand up like at a wall, but they don't need to have a freestanding handstand or be like, advanced athlete to start that one. And then hanging, sorry to interrupt. Yeah, the hanging program, that's kind of starting kind of a new branch of what I want to do, which is getting more into other areas of body weight training.
Okay, cool. So I have something came up for me, and that is in your handstand push-up program, do you have a lot of women attending?
Yeah, actually, it's quite surprising, about 50-50 with the handstand push-up program. And, that's really, that was really important to me. And it was really important to me when I have one-on-one students, I usually but I usually program bent arm pushing strength for them as well as their handstands. Because I think a lot of women avoid it because they think they're bad at it. And it's not that they don't have the capacity to build that strength, it's just that they've never done it. And they naturally feel more comfortable in the straight arm push. They have good mobility, so they can do that. And the bent arm stuff is just challenging because maybe the only time they've tried it is to actually go up to handstand and try a handstand push-up, which is not step 1. And so, people so I do encourage it. And I think it's such a great way to build that really good shoulder strength and stability, which can help your handstands as well, even if your goal at the end of it is not to do a freestanding handstand push-up, but it can really help increase your strength for handstands.
Yeah, and save it when you fall out.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
I am wondering why you chose to have a focus on strength building rather than mobility, because we see a lot of handstand coaches also focus on the flexibility part. And with you, I find it super fascinating and awesome that you give this space to build strength. And it's, you kind of take this stereotype of women who don't want to go into strength training or don't want to focus on that mainly, and you give them a place to just explore that and be like that. If that makes sense.
No, yeah, it makes perfect sense. And I think mobility is a big, it's an important part of your handstand practice for sure. Like if you don't have that mobility, working on it and improving it is definitely going to help you get there. So it's definitely part of everything I do. But my passion lies in the strength training for sure. And, that's something that, even when I was 5 years old, having muscles and being strong was I was so proud of that. My gymnastics coach called me muscles, and it was just it just made me feel so good. And I was always oh, I can do all this cool stuff because I'm strong. And I was super lucky. I never... I hear stories about women getting told they're too bulky or that, it's unfeminine to have muscles. My friends in high school were just they brag about my muscles to the guys. They're like, come on, Kirsty's got bigger biceps than you and stuff like that. So to me, it was just always this positive. It was always oh, this is really great to have. And so I want to share that with people because it feels, it's so empowering. And the ability to do things with your body and be strong enough to press yourself up from the floor and push up from a handstand push-up, just to me it feels incredible. And then I've noticed with students as well, they get a new they get their first pull-up or they get their first press to handstand or handstand push-up, and they take all that confidence and that like strength with them when they leave the gym. And I'm just like, I just love that. So it's a huge, it's my passion.
Best feeling in the world.
Yes.
As a coach. So when you teach women, do you find you have to take a different approach, or is it exactly the same for you as with men?
Usually it's similar. I would say, I mean, a lot of this is generalizing, but I would say a lot of men will have better bent arm strength coming into training with me than women. So something like a handstand push-up, the guys will naturally have better bent arm strength. And in general, the women will tend to have better overhead mobility and better like hip flexibility for things like a press stance. And those are like completely general. You'll always get, people on the other side, like guys with great flexibility, women who are just bananas strong. And so, they're very general. So typically if I'm like programming for a woman, there would be more of a focus on building the strength from the foundation, not kind of starting at maybe such an advanced level because they maybe don't have the same foundation. And with the guys, it would be a lot more like working the mobility work into their strength training so that, they don't feel like, oh, I'm just doing mobility for an hour because they like the strength training. So it feels like it's kind of part of it. So that's one difference. One thing I found, even with myself, when I first got back into bodyweight training, this was like in my 30s, and I had this foundation of doing gymnastics as a kid. I was always really strong, even like in gymnastics. I hadn't done a lot of like bodyweight training, but when I started this journey, I could probably do 10, 15 pull-ups. So I felt like I was in a pretty good place. But I did some online programs, and even the first levels, the beginner versions, just felt like they were too advanced for me. Just things like, it would be like, the pull-ups would quickly progress to weighted pull-ups, or it would have like dips on the rings in numbers where like 10 reps, and I'm like, do 10. And just I felt like it made me feel like really, well, not weak, but I was just like, oh, I thought I was strong coming into this, and now I don't feel strong enough to complete this program. And so that was one of my big things, is like, what about people who aren't at that level coming into it? Like, where do we start them, and how can we get them up to that level? And it's not just women that are not kind of starting at that initial level, but I think, like, for me, that's kind of where I want to focus with the bodyweight stuff is, just creating like a nice starting point for people.
Yeah, I think you're exceptional at that, like at teaching to, first of all, grown-ups, but then also very like beginner friendly. Your programs are very beginner friendly, and everything that I see on your Instagram is just absolutely amazing. What has your experience been like along the years of teaching grown-ups? What are like the main things that you've learned and how to approach it?
Yeah, I mean, I've learned a lot through doing things wrong. So as I said at the beginning, like, I started teaching competitive gymnastics when I was 19, and I did that for about 5 years. And one thing I realized looking back is actually teaching them is easy, right? Competitive gymnasts are like, they can look at a movement and then just go and do it. And so there's a little bit of cueing and teaching them technique, but a lot of it is like motivating them to want to do these movements. And yeah, they're young, they're bendy, and it's fun, but it's very different than taking an adult who maybe hasn't worked on learning new movements for a long time. And so they don't have that same ability to just be like, oh, I'm going to figure that out. it can take adults quite a lot of time to, it might be a long time since they last learned something completely new. And so it can take some time to figure it out. And the other big thing that looking, like now it seems really stupid that this was a surprise to me. But at the time I was like, well, what are you scared of? Like my wife, she was one of the first people I started teaching a handstand. I'm like, you're scared to go upside down? Why? Like, and so a huge part of like figuring that out, like there was two big things. One was just really listening to my students and being like, okay, how do you feel doing this? What are the things that are making you uncomfortable? And then figuring out like, okay, well, what if we did this, this, and this? Would that feel more comfortable for you? And, just approaching it from a perspective of like I don't necessarily understand exactly how you're feeling because I've done a handstand. I don't remember not being able to do that, but I can help you figure out, like I know all the progressions and I can help you figure out once I understand what you're struggling with. And so that's something that I continue to do today, because even though I've coached hundreds of students, there's everyone's fear or experience or thoughts about what they're capable of are going to be slightly different. And so if I just assume like, oh, this person's just scared the same way, some of my other students are scared, like I might miss something. So I always like to think, coaching's a communication. And then the other side was just like learning from as many people as possible. And, when I first started doing teaching, it would be like every weekend I'd be at a different certification. And a lot of it was not so much learning, like, because I went to like kettlebell certifications and like, all these different things that I don't teach. But it was like, how did they teach movement to people? And how do they teach movement to adults and groups of adults? And how do they explain things? And so it was just like trying to be a sponge and taking in as much as I can. And also meeting people. And making friends and making connections, and that was really helpful too.
Yeah, wow, amazing. So you basically took all the sources and put together your own way of teaching through your experience and through everything you learned. Yeah,
I mean, it was like everything I do, I've learned from someone else, and it's just like taking this from here and this from here and this from here, and being like, okay, these are the things that really work for me, and this is the way that I'm gonna teach, and I'm continuing to change it and learn it. Like that's so key. Is like every new student is a new opportunity for me to learn something new, and
I love how you said that teaching is a communication, and I really love that you emphasize that part of teaching, and you managed to basically bring people together online in an online setting, which I find super cool.
Yeah.
And so a big part of that, I think, or like what I can see in your presence is that you just bring so much fun into it. And I'm thinking of your comics right now. Right. How did they come up? How did you come up with the idea?
So I've always loved drawing badly. Like picture, yeah. Well, they're not a realistic representation of anything. Like I'll sit with friends and we'll be like, I'll be playing Pictionary. This is my favorite game in the world, Pictionary. And I'll be drawing the same thing. Like we'll both be drawing goat. We like look at each other's paper. Theirs looks like a goat. Mine is like this thing with like horns, and I don't even have like a tail in the right place. Like but to me, you can just communicate so much through a picture. And so how it first came about that I started drawing them for my kind of handstands was I was traveling and I had a student message me saying, "What do you mean by this?" And so I'm sitting on a plane and I just kind of sketch out what I mean. And, it's got like the position that I want her to be in, but the face, because I know she's going to find this hard, the face is like this kind of face. And, to this day, she's like, every time I do that movement, like that's the picture that I visualize. And it makes me smile, and it also makes me do it with the correct technique because I remember the image, and I was like, oh wow, that's super powerful. And so yeah, from there, then I would do it a little more and share them, and people seem to kind of remember them and connect to them. And for me, that's a huge part of coaching. It's not just like, here's the perfect feedback for you. It's like, what's the feedback that person's going to understand how to do in their body and is going to remember? And so a lot of the time, the cues and the feedback that I remember are the ones that come with like a backstory, or that come with like an image that sticks in my mind. And so I try to use that with students as well and get them to remember things by making it something a little bit memorable.
That's so cool. And it requires you to get playful as well, does it?
Yeah. And I love that. To me, this is just so much fun. So, and if it's not fun, then
what's the
why?
point?
Why? Yeah. So.
Yeah. I have one last question for you. And that is, what are you training on yourself right now? Is there anything in particular that you're focused on?
So I'm in my training, I'm typically very like goal focused and skill focused. And, I always, in the past, I've always had like, I want to get this, I want to get a 1-arm handstand. And then when I get that, it'd be like, I want to get a planche. And then, I'd cycle, right? And I'd go through these different big skills that I wanted to get and either get a coach or plan my training around that skill. Last year, I had a really hard time with recovery, and I'm still not sure exactly what happened, but I just found I wasn't recovering from my strength training, and I couldn't train that much, and I couldn't make progress on my skills. And it could have been stress from the pandemic, being in lockdown. It could have been, I'm 42, could have been perimenopause, and whatever it was, I took a lot of, my focus really since then has been on recovery. And so I took a lot of steps like improving my sleep, improving my nutrition. And in like, I've always felt like I eat healthy, but there was certain things when I did research, it was like, oh, this might be better for recovering from workouts. And this might be better for, getting my iron higher. Because I've always, been on that borderline of a little bit low in iron. So I did a few changes to nutrition. And
can I ask what you changed in your nutrition?
So it wasn't big things. One of them was I made sure I was eating after workouts. And so like typically I would train, and then if I wasn't, it might be 2 or 3 hours until the next meal. And so I made a real point of being like, I need to get some protein straight after training, just to help with that recovery from the workout. And a lot of what I implemented is from Dr. Stacy Sims. And I don't know if you're familiar with her, but she's really big into like women's physiology. And she has a number of online courses like Women Are Not Small Men, where she talks about the differences in training and nutrition for women specifically. I like absolutely adore her stuff. Like she's so smart. So I implemented a lot of things from her. So that was one. The other was just eating a little bit more, because I'd been on this no sugar challenge. And when you're eating no sugar, like anything like that, you end up eating less just because like everything has sugar in it. So, I just kind of was like, okay, I need to eat a little bit more, just make sure I'm eating enough. And then there was a few little changes in terms of making sure I got more protein. And as a vegan, it's something I've always been aware of, but I started tracking it and being like, okay, some days I'm maybe not getting as much as I could be, as I need. I started taking adaptogens, and this is another Stacy Sims recommendation. It can be really helpful for like hormone things. And she has some really good resources on that and looking at what your symptoms are and then which adaptogens might help you.
Can I ask what adaptogens are?
So things like maca, so things that kind of work and they can, I actually don't know the exact definition of what means an adaptogen, but they're essentially kind of help with hormonal health. They help with stress levels and things like that. So you'll get a lot of them in, if you're taking like mushroom,
like cordyceps and
yes, exactly,
ginkgo.
Reishi, yeah.
Ginkgo's not a mushroom, but
right. So those are the nutrition ones. It wasn't anything big, and I took an iron supplement, and that might have made a big difference because I have had anemia in the past, and so the iron for someone who's anemic can make a huge difference in terms of energy levels. So,
just so we get an idea of what your training load was and your volume, like before the pandemic and then when you started to feel more fatigued.
Yeah, so I would train, especially during the pandemic, because, you need, like, you're on your own, it's hard. Obviously I'm with my wife and cats, but, I find training to be like, that was my emotional help during the pandemic. And so I was training every day, maybe 2 hours. And a lot of that was not intense training. So maybe strength work would be like 45 minutes. Some of it would be mobility, movement, handstands. But it was quite a fairly high volume, but not super intense. And then I cut down to like basically one strength session a week. When I was having that issue, I'd do one strength session a week. And then, I'd continue to do some locomotion work and some mobility work. And that probably lasted like, and I took up foot juggling. Because I was like, this is something that's not too strenuous. I'll take up foot juggling. And so that's been amazing that I can learn something new. And it's not as physically straining as the strength stuff. And it's, probably like 6 months. I was maybe only strength training once or twice a week, really focusing on recovery. And then I have this year started to get more back into the training. And so I'm probably strength training. So my training right now, I have 3 days where I train legs and hip mobility because that is a big weakness for me. So it's something I'm focusing on. I have 3 days I'm training pulling because, again, I'm so much stronger in pushing than I am in pulling, and I want to kind of get those a little more even. And so that's only like 30 minutes, the pulling work. And then on top of that, I'll do some handstand work, but quite light, and then my foot juggling a couple of times a week for an hour. So it seems like a lot, but in terms of like actual volume of hard strength work, there's not a huge amount in there, and I just make sure I'm able to recover.
So funny, you're like the opposite of me. My pulling is so much stronger. My hip mobility has become a strength. It was a weakness for a long time, but my pushing is not so strong.
Yeah, and I think about it, I think a lot of that comes from, what you train and what you do. And because I think back to when I was in gymnastics, I was like, I was the rope climb champion of my gym.
That is really cool.
I was good at pulling. So yeah, I just thought, it's because I train the pushing so much. And especially when I created the handstand push-up program, like I tested like 6 or 7 iterations of that until it was how I wanted it. And so I was just getting like so strong at handstand push-ups.
What do you mean you tested 6 or 7 iterations? Like you had 6 or 7 versions of the program and you went through them? Or what does that mean?
Yeah, so I created a program, I tested it, and I was like, I'll tweak that. And I changed some things and then redid it, and then changed some things and redid it. And sometimes I was testing it with other students as well. And it wasn't like big changes. It was just like I'd tweak little things, and then I'd maybe take another group of people through some of the training, and always do it myself because I like to experience all the workouts that I put together to know like how long do they take, and is this too intense, is it too easy, and all those things. So yeah.
Wow, you're awesome.
Oh.
You're so amazing. I wish we could exchange our, our features. I could give you a little bit of pulling. You could give me a little bit of pushing.
Exactly.
It's so great to talk to you finally. I mean,
Oh, thank you.
we've kind of been touching on each other with different projects like the Handstand Press magazine, because I guess people know that you're contributing with your comics.
Yeah.
And
I've wanted to be on the show for so long. So
yeah, and I wish we could have visited you, and I hope that we can still do that as soon as travel is open. And I just got my first shot yesterday. So
yay.
one step closer.
Yeah. No, I had my first shot, hopefully second shot June, July. So
Awesome. Do you have any plans to give in-person workshops as soon as, we open up and everything?
Not right now. I'm kind of waiting to see what happens. It seems so hard to make plans right now. Like, you make a plan and then they change the rules, and so I'm just kind of waiting until things seem stable, and then I'll start planning that. My big plan is to just go visit my family in Scotland as soon as that's allowed. I'll be there, and I'll be available for hangouts, but I'm probably not going to plan any big teaching. It's just like lots of time hugging my family, and then after that, once I've done that, then I'll start thinking about teaching again.
Yeah, that sounds about right. I mean, we don't even know if everything's going to work the way we imagine it will with the vaccine. And
yeah, there's so many unknowns, but I feel like there's hope. Things are moving in the right direction, and yeah, I'm hopeful.
Thank you so much, Kirsty. I wish I could hug you right now. So
I know.
Give you a virtual hug. Thanks for coming on the show, and I hope that you found this interview as interesting as I did. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to comment down below. We'll put your link, Kirsty, of your website. We'll put it in the description, and your Instagram, so you have to go and check her out there. Probably already know her. But thank you so much for joining. And it's never too late to do what you love. I'll see you next time.
Yes.